So I would always prefer to be in a space where I'm kind of isolated and where I kind of do this thing where I bring out all the gear that I think I'm going to need and kind of set it around me in a circle and sit in the middle of it with my laptop so that I don't have to move. So I'm completely kind of in the creative zone. What I find is that I'll create some kind of atmosphere musically, and then I've fallen in love with the sound of it, and then I'm inspired to write some lyrics in it because I can sit there with my laptop with my headphones on and my microphone plugged in and a load of reverb, and I'm in like a cave of my own sound creation.
Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited. I had a look at your work, and there's so much creativity. It's so rich in creatively speaking. So I'm really looking forward to asking you all kinds of questions.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here and to actually meet you. And equally, I've had a look at your stuff and I think it looks all really interesting and exciting. So yeah, I'm just happy to be here and chat.
Great. So my first question is for the audience mainly. Can you talk a bit more? What art do you do and how did you get into doing it?
Yeah, so my alias is called INCONNIA, and I launched that about, the first song that I put out as part of that alias came out on April 1st, although it's kind of been in the works for the past 2 years. So the main art that I do is music, and it's alternative pop music with a really big focus on mental health advocacy. And within that also, I kind of make all my own videos. So I'm kind of really handy with a paintbrush, and I like making my own sets for music videos and YouTube videos. And my merch is all kind of, paintings and hand designed things. So kind of fine art is in the mix as well. But I'm primarily a musician.
Amazing. That sounds very interesting. And I had a look at your website, obviously, and I love that it's such a consistent style, and it's almost like this, it's this complete portfolio that feels like I'm looking at a poster where everything has, a reason to be there, and it's all very much in the same spirit. So I really love that. How did you get into making music?
Well, firstly, thanks for the compliment on my website. I was sat there nodding like, yes, and inside I'm like, oh, thank you. So nice. Not like that didn't take me hours and hours and hours over Christmas when there was nothing else to do in lockdown. So your question was, how did I get into music? So I have been playing violin since I was 6, which is a really long time. I'm now 22, so that's, 14 years, is that right? I don't know, whatever the maths is on that. And I had a friend who played violin who was a bit older than me, and my parents said, if in 6 months you still want to play violin, after this friend came over and she recited Twinkle Twinkle Little Star to my utter amusement and joy. So my mum said, if you still want to play the violin in 6 months' time and you're still thinking about it, you can have some lessons. And so I did. So I had lessons, and I grew up in Devon in England in the countryside, and there's a really big folk scene there. So I was also in the pub from the age of 6 playing the violin, and that's really where it started, I think. And then since then I just carried on with it, and then I got into songwriting and music production as well. Those are kind of my 2 main things alongside violin. And I got into those when I was actually a lot older, when I was in college, so I was about 17. And I'd kind of discovered that, because for all my life up until that point I'd kind of just been playing the violin and gigging and learning pieces of music for people's sessions or for gigs or whatever it might be, and I kind of realized, wait, I can write my own music. And so from there, that's kind of where I think I really fell in love with music at that point, and then there wasn't really a going back from that point. Great.
So you're focusing on mental health. So is there a particular reason why this is something close to your heart?
Yes. So I was diagnosed with OCD and PTSD as a result of relationship trauma when I was about 17 or 18. And the problem with that is that's all very well, and I don't know what the stats are for people with kind of mental health things, but there's hundreds of thousands of millions of us across the globe who have mental health struggles. However, the trouble with those two diagnoses in particular is that OCD sufferers in general are struggling for 10 years before they get a diagnosis, because there's so much stigma and it's not talked about. So which actually you only need to have symptoms of OCD for 2 to 3 weeks to be eligible for a diagnosis. So that's a huge, so if most people, including myself, because my first symptoms of OCD started when I was about 10, and so I got a diagnosis when I was 18, so that's pretty much fits in exactly. But maybe if I'd been given treatment and there wasn't such a stigma and there was an awareness about it and I kind of knew what the symptoms were, I wouldn't have struggled for those 8 years, which was the entirety of my adolescence. And trauma is similar in a sense. Well, I mean, I'm primarily talking about relationship trauma, aka domestic abuse. However, I like to call it relationship trauma because not all relationship abuse happens within a domestic setting. So I think that's quite a misleading term for people. So for example, I didn't realize I was in what was classed legally as a domestic abuse situation because I wasn't living with that person, I wasn't married to that person, blah 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 blah. And we don't have any education about that. We don't have any education about, or in this country anyway, in England, any education about what a safe relationship should look like until, and the trouble is, once you're traumatized and your world kind of crashes around you, then you have to do the work to undo that. But what if there were people in the world that were talking about these conditions that meant that people from a younger age or any age could recognize the signs of these things before they get too out of control? That was such a long answer, but I'm quite kind of passionate about the whole thing. I think it's so important.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's something that's very close to my heart as well. I've done some films that had mental health as one of the main themes, and from what I found when I was researching this and also talking to people to this day, I find that a lot of people have misconceptions about what all of these different types of mental health issues are, how they kind of show and form, and also what is helpful when someone suffers from something like this. Because if you've never suffered from any sort of depression or anxiety, whatever it is, that it's very hard to put yourself in the position of what it is like and what actually is helpful. And I think a lot of times the world makes it worse. And so it's often easier to just pretend that you're fine and that you're happy and just, move on. And like I myself suffer as well, like depression usually is my thing. And the ups and downs are really insane. Like you can be in one mood in one moment and then half an hour later, the whole world is painted in black. And it's very difficult to deal with that sometimes. So I find it great that you speak so openly about it and that you also target this in your work and are so open about it in your work.
Absolutely.
So how do you experience that? So do you try to speak about very personal things in your music, or how do you address that?
So, I mean, and this is something that I will be thinking about more and more as more music comes out. But I think there has to be a boundary in place around kind of personal information. There just has to be, because I don't want my personal life to be up for discussion.
Yeah, there's a level of protection.
There's a level of protection and self-protection, and I think anyone who has been in a traumatic situation will probably particularly relate to that idea of wanting to keep yourself safe and not having anything regarding, I mean, I'm sure there are also people who would say the complete opposite, but I would imagine there's a lot of people that relate in the sense that you don't want those details to be up for discussion for anyone apart from, in my case, my therapist and my closest friends. and that's it. So there's that boundary in place, and I wouldn't personally want to go into huge amounts of depth about the real details and ins and outs of kind of
what happened.
OCD either, in a way that's affected me, because it's kind of irrelevant to the discussion. But what is relevant is talking about in a broader sense what the actual symptoms of these things are, the ways that they actually affect kind of people in their day-to-day life, in a taking it out of my own life and into the lives of the information that's available from organizations like NHS and Mind, and promoting those resources and that kind of thing. So that's kind of that's where I'm at with it now. Anyway, we'll see, maybe my answer will be completely different in 6 months time, but at the moment there is certainly a boundary for me on
that makes a lot of sense,
where that information is coming from. And also I feel that I have a responsibility to make sure the information that I'm putting out is accurate, because the trouble with stigma is that it's basically a bunch of lies, right? It's just a bunch of kind of like fairy tales that get passed around and have negative consequences for the people affected by, in this conversation, mental health issues. So for example, OCD, people assume it's about obsessive washing and cleaning, or it's about kind of counting the amount of times you switch on and off a light switch when you enter the room or whatever, and people be like, oh, I'm so OCD about this, I'm so OCD about that, but that information is so incorrect and I don't want to add to that. And yes, there are people with OCD that struggle with those things, but it's not because they like it.
I think a lot of people have their knowledge from Hollywood movies from the 90s about these things.
And daytime TV, there's literally a show that exists called Obsessive Compulsive Cleaners. It's just it's awful. But anyway,
I think that a mental health issue is experienced. Everyone experiences it differently, and you can't generalize and say this is the only way that is valid how you experience it. And it's very important to allow people to be individuals, which we all are, and we experience it in different ways. So that's very interesting. Let's talk a bit about your creative process. So the first question that is kind of close to mental health, and that's something that I'm really curious, because personally I find that I'm sometimes at my most creative in my darkest moments. And that's why I have this sort of love-hate relationship with these mood swings as well, because they can be useful, because everything is just, bigger and more intense. How is that for you?
It's really interesting hearing you say that, because I also know other people who would say that those moments are so debilitating that they can't do anything and creativity completely stops. But then I've spoken to people like you before where they say, yes, whilst this is a major horrible inconvenience to my life, at least I can kind of bring something out of it, right? And both of those are completely valid ways of going through that. Personally, for me, it's on the debilitating side. So if I'm in kind of a real mental health moment, I'm probably in bed. I'm probably not able to even move necessarily, or do anything, or think about anything other than, well, obsessions, I guess. Because that's the kind of the main thing.
Do you then find that when you recover from that moment, let's call it recover, that then you maybe use art as an outlet, or would you say that it comes more from the moments where you feel most at peace?
I don't think it's kind of either of those things. It's kind of, so I had a pact with myself for about 2 years, 3 years maybe, where I decided I would make a creative idea every day, and it could be really short, it could be literally just a few words, or it could be a whole song, or it could be a recording of the rain, or anything, just so long as I had done something. And I did that every day religiously, pretty much, for about 2 years. And by doing that, it completely took the onus off needing to write about something in particular, or being like, I need to put this thought, or I've been inspired by this thing today. And actually it just became sort of a task. And through that, then looking back on that archive, I realized that a lot of those songs were about mental health. So actually I've kind of come at it that way, and it's been a much more unconscious process, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
On the other hand, because I studied music at university, and I did do a project as part of university, one of my modules, which was kind of about alternative music and fringe music aesthetics, and I chose noise music, and I wrote an essay about the correlation between noise music and PTSD healing. Which I won't go into hugely right now because it's just kind of a whole other thing. But within that, I kind of on demand then made a noise intertwined with singer-songwriter EP. It was about 20 minutes of music, which was specifically about exploring the links between the sensation of trauma and the sensation of listening to noise music, which is basically lots of fuzziness and confusion and various things. So, I mean, I suppose
that's very
an answer to the question. That's kind of where any of it's come from, I suppose.
That's very interesting. I would love to listen to that, and maybe we can put a link underneath the video so
yeah,
can
absolutely
explore that. That sounds really, really interesting. Yeah, how you perceive that, that's really interesting. Yeah, one of my short films was kind of centered a little bit about PTSD, so I'm very curious to explore that. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you can read the essay if you want.
Yeah, I would like to.
Might not put that in the link, but you can certainly read it.
Perfect. Let's talk a bit more about your creative process. So I really love that you set yourself this task of doing a piece of creativity every day. And I think from my personal experience, the moments when I want to make art the least are sometimes the moments where I should be doing them the most, because I find it really healing. Just doing any sort of simple task can be healing, like even like household tasks can sometimes help, because the, monotony of that can be really helpful. But art is just really, like, whether it's singing for me or writing or just painting, I do that a lot just for fun, without any, goal or anything. I find it really healing. So what did you learn about yourself in those few years? Like, do you find it more easy now to get started when you want to do something creative? Because
yeah, I think the most beneficial thing about it was being able to create on demand. So, but when I started, I had real trouble with finishing projects and coming up with new ideas. But now, if someone's like, have an idea, I can be like, okay, done. Because I did 2 years of basically doing creativity on demand. And somewhere along the way, I learned how to finish songs. I'm not really sure how that happened. I know that lots of people struggle with that. Kind of, they get halfway through a song and then they leave it for a few days and they think, oh, I don't know what to do next. And I don't know, I just somehow overcame that as well. But yeah, and the other thing that's really useful, of course, is that I now have 550 ideas I can pick from if I'm ever completely stuck, which is great.
Yeah, that is great. And I've done like a very small challenge comparatively to yours, like a 30-day challenge of creating a music piece, like a 1.5 minute music piece, which I thought in the beginning I wouldn't be able to do, which is why it was a challenge that I chose. And I realized that you can push yourself quite a lot. And actually, my favorite music piece was one that I created on a day where I thought it was impossible and took me 2 hours to get there. And so I think what we learn over the years is really how we work as creatives and what we need, what kind of inspiration we need. I'm more on the side of not necessarily waiting to be inspired, but rather making myself inspired.
Yes, I completely agree. I'm completely with you on that. Especially, I mean, because I'm currently making my living from doing musical stuff. So a mix of commissions and tutoring mainly at the moment. And with that, it's incredibly important to not wait for inspiration, because if I was doing that, I would not be able to work with my clients. And just kind of the freedom of being able to kind of pick up a guitar and say, oh, okay, I'm going to write something. And it doesn't matter if it's really crap or if I've written a really great song, but just anything. There's something really freeing about being able to do that, as opposed to being hit with creative block, which I know it's a struggle for people. And whenever I've had a conversation with someone who's like, how do you get over creative block? I'm like, write every day for a year and then you will learn.
Yeah, it's a mixture of not necessarily discipline, but a habit, I guess, a habit of creating, and then also getting to know yourself and how you work. And from these interviews, I've learned that people have really opposite habits. Like some people need a very strict schedule and some people need complete freedom and, you know, being allowed to do things whenever and however they want. So how does the process start for you? Let's say you have an idea, a little inspiration. What is the first thing that you do, let's say, when you write a song?
Good question. First, well, it'll go one of two ways. The first way is that I've been noodling on my guitar and I write a song, in which case I will just record it in my voice memo and it will probably get lost in there forever and never get finished, if I'm completely honest, but at least I caught the idea. The way in which I actually write songs to finish them, or let's say I'd written something on a guitar and decided I definitely wanted to finish it, or I was writing something completely from scratch, I would open my laptop and open my DAW, which is Logic Pro, and pick some instruments, fiddle around with them, make some riffs, add in some scratch vocals, and then go from there, keep building.
So it always starts with the music for you?
Always starts with the music. I don't think I've ever written lyrics first. I know people do it the opposite way, but I'm not that person. I'm very obsessed with music production.
That's interesting.
It's like everything at the moment that goes through my brain musically also simultaneously will get put through some kind of mental production process. So it's kind of like my laptop and my production gear are an extension of my brain at this point.
So how do you add lyrics then if it's, you know, a song with lyrics? At what point does that come in?
So maybe let's say in this example I've put down a marimba. I love marimba. I put marimba everywhere. I love it. And I've put down some kind of electronic bass, which I also love. And then I've got out my guitar and noodled a little bit over the top. Cool, I have some kind of structure. I probably kind of made that structure up quite freely as I went along. Maybe it's like 30 seconds long or a minute long. And then I would pull out my microphone and someone asked me this the other day, you know, and I was really lost for an answer because I sort of just sing into the microphone and then something will eventually come out. And I won't necessarily know what the song is until I've sort of written a verse, and then I can read into my own words, like some kind of weird mental horoscope of what the rest of the song should be about. But I don't really think about it that hard. I just kind of noodle around vocally until I find a melody that I like, and then I either sing the melody in and fill in the words later, or some words will come out, which is what normally happens. And then I'll go from there. I don't find lyric writing very challenging, basically, because I don't know why. I just don't.
I think we all just have our natural ways, that some things are easier than others. For me, I have to write the lyrics first, and simply because I need to find an emotional connection with the song. Otherwise, I'll get lost along the way, and it doesn't end up being something that I like. So that's just from experience. Anytime I start with the music, I have a hard time finishing the song. So I need to start with lyrics I really care about. And then the songwriting is very easy for me. And again, the melody also is similar to you. I'll just start singing and see what comes out. And
That's so interesting. I find it quite difficult to find emotion in lyrics initially. So maybe that's why I do it the way around I do it. Because what I find is that I'll create some kind of atmosphere musically, and then I've fallen in love with the sound of it, and then I'm inspired to write some lyrics in it, because I can sit there with my laptop with my headphones on and my microphone plugged in and a load of reverb, and I'm in like a cave of my own sound creation, and that is when I'm all kind of
See, but
excited
it sounds like because you started playing the violin so early, and you focused on the music side of things. For me, I didn't play an instrument or started playing until I was 15, but I started writing around 10, 11, and I was writing poetry for a long time. So that was more my way of expressing myself. So I guess we're kind of just biased in one way or another.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it that way, but it does make sense. And I only started writing songs when I was 17. So really, the first 10 years of my music experience was completely music and not words.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah, super interesting.
Great. So how do you, what is the kind of environment that you need to create? Do you need a certain time of day? Do you need to be in complete peace and silence, or do you sometimes need to go out and get inspiration there? And then what is the ideal environment for you?
My favorite thing, well, first thing is feeling like I'm not being listened to.
Mm-hmm.
So I would always prefer to be in a space where I'm kind of isolated and where I kind of do this thing where I bring out all the gear that I think I'm going to need and kind of set it around me in a circle and sit in the middle of it with my laptop. So that I don't have to move, so I'm completely kind of in the creative zone. And then my favorite thing is to do that for a couple hours, then go and say hello to, well, at the moment it's one of my housemates.
Mm-hmm.
So either one, whichever is around, go and say hello, have a quick chat and then come back. Or previous to the pandemic, I was still in uni, so I graduated during the pandemic. And my favorite thing then, they had kind of bookable soundproof rooms, and I'd go and sit in there for hours and then go and wander down the corridor and say hello to my friends and then go back.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. I like being alone, but I like being near people.
I think sometimes you need a refresher where you just go outside and you think about something else. Also for the ears, I think at some point you just don't hear everything anymore, or you're getting very biased in one direction.
Yes.
Something else, and then you can go back.
Absolutely. I don't know if you do much mixing work, but yeah, you all know about kind of phantom sounds and starting to hear things that are not there then. It's so important. All that horrible moment when you mix something that you think is perfect, and the next morning you wake up and it's just awful. It took me about a year to realise that there's such a thing as ear fatigue and that you shouldn't just keep mixing for hours and wake up hoping for the best. It's not going to work out.
No, I think sometimes we're more productive when we have like spurts of work and then, a bit of play or whatever. Yeah, for sure. And so you make your own music videos as well. How is the process for making those? Do you come up with a concept first, or do you jump into the creation process?
I have a bit of a Pinterest mind map, which I've been collecting things on for about 3 years. Not with music videos in mind, but with kind of general, because I was kind of aware that I was going to launch INCONNIA as a project about 3 years ago, and it's kind of taken about 2.5 years to actually get to the point where I could do it, for all kinds of reasons. So I was kind of collecting things that I liked aesthetically, and then when it came to starting to think about music videos, just kind of curating that collection into smaller chunks of inspiration to come up with kind of an aesthetic direction. Yes, each one is planned in advance to an extent. I will basically plan kind of 2 or 3 different sets. I kind of think about things in terms of sets, to be honest, because I'm quite a visual person. So, and the emotion of the set, so what's the emotion of the world that I'm creating for this particular shot, or whatever it might be. So for Slow Down, which is the song that came out in April, there's about 3 or 4 different sets. My ring is on a really weird angle now. It's kind of flashing. Really horrible for fiddling with things in my hand.
Me too.
So yeah, but and then I'm just standing in front. I've got a ring light there, you can see it in the background, which my phone here clips into, and I just stick that in front of the set and mouth along and dance along or whatever it is. There's one that I'm collaborating on, which is much more planned, that I'm working on with someone else who's kind of a performance artist. So that will be more planned to an extent, but even so, I quite like being quite spontaneous.
Yeah, I find when you have an idea of what you want to do and then you can let go, that's a very interesting place to be.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's pretty much sums up what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I find your videos very, very inspired and very fresh. And I like that you're not scared of the camera and you're not scared of creating something. And I find a lot of musicians that I'm talking to, they have a weird relationship with music videos, because obviously we have in our minds like these very stylized and high production, a few million pounds worth music videos. But I find it's a lot of fun if you just allow yourself to accept the limitations that we have. We don't have a few million budget. We don't have any location that we can think of. But we have every sort of idea that we can come up with within the restrictions. There is an endless amount of things that we can do.
I completely agree with you. And I think from the start, I've been aware that, I mean, I love business. I think I say this in every interview. It comes to a point where at some point I say, I love business, and they go, okay. But the thing is, if you are trying to run a project on the scale that my project is on, which is large, because I've got singles coming out every 2 months with a video, with 3 extra YouTube videos, with a marketing campaign, and with merch and all kinds of other stuff. So to keep a handle on that as one person, there has to be some kind of business planning aspect to that. Otherwise, I will run out of budget and I will run out of time and I will burn out and then I will crash, and then that will be the end of it, right? So I was always aware from the very, very start of the very first pen to paper aesthetic idea for a music video or anything else that I'm putting out with release, that I don't really have any money to put towards this project, because I'm not making enough money back from the project at the moment to have a budget. Like, it has to be a self-fulfilling thing, otherwise you're going to debt, right? I mean, there's a certain amount of money that I'm just putting in because it's a passion project, but you know, it's a small amount. And so I think it's really important to create within your restraints, as you've just said. And so my restraints are, I've got a couple of locations in my house that I can feasibly have about 2 meters squared, which is enough space for my iPhone camera to capture a horizontal image and for me to hang some stuff up on the walls and do something cool. And I live in an area of London which has a lot of fly tipping, so there's a lot of random crap on the streets that I routinely pick up to make into music video props. Which is completely free, and it's just all it involves is just an idea and then creating that within the budget. But I'm kind of thinking budget first. I'm kind of thinking, what can I do within the limitation, as opposed to imagining myself standing on a cliff in a ring of fire with 5 dancers or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not thinking of a high budget idea to then lower. I'm thinking of low budget ideas to make as good as they possibly can be. And thanks for the compliment. I just realized that whole question was actually kind of a compliment in of itself.
Yeah, it definitely is. You know,
I appreciate that.
Your videos are like art installations, but with moving images. So that's what I find so inspiring, because otherwise, you know, you can make a reasonably nice, normal music video. You go out to the park and you have someone film it and you stand there and you sing your stuff, and it can be nice, but I think that becomes repetitive so fast.
So do I.
And I find it really challenging to have like a very minimal setup, but try to make it fresh and different every single time. So I love to work with layers. So just taking all kinds of videos outside that have nothing to do with me, but also then fronting the camera and then layering that and experimenting with colors. There's an endless amount of stuff that you can do.
Absolutely. And all of that kind of thing can have a magical effect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How do you work with cover art for your singles?
Oh, good question. I kind of designed a bunch of cover art because I'm kind of thinking about the next year of releases as an album, even though to no one else it will look like an album because I'm releasing all the songs as singles, but I have 9 songs that in my head are a collection. So I basically, right at the start of when I was thinking about INCONNIA, I kind of already had those 9 songs because I was doing those daily ideas, so I kind of already selected them. So I knew what the songs were going to be, even though they weren't finished. And I was thinking about the aesthetic of INCONNIA. So I basically just made 9 cover arts in Photoshop to help me discern what the visual aesthetic of INCONNIA was going to be. So they've been done before the songs were done. Because I was learning how to design as I was doing it. Oh my, it was horrible. I was a horrible designer at the start. It was awful.
I think it's similar there as with, you're mixing for 3 hours and then you come back and you think, what is this? It's the same with designing. Sometimes you feel, oh, this is great. And then the next day you think, oh my God, I'm so glad I didn't release this yet.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I had these like 9 art ideas for the singles, which all kind of correlate to each other. And then basically for each song now, I'm just refreshing the art so that it looks better and ties in with the music video for each release. That's basically it. It's kind of been done for ages.
But I like the idea of creating the artwork and that being almost part of the songwriting process. Yeah. It's like you're creating not just the music, but you're creating like a world. It's like world building, and there are different aspects, and that's very different from what a lot of people do. So,
well, thank you. I really appreciate that. That's
so that's next for you, the album. Do you have any other projects that you're excited about for the next foreseeable?
Yeah, so I have a friend called Ehsan Amani. Shout out Ehsan if you are watching this podcast at any point. I shall tell him the timestamp for when his name is mentioned. Anyway, it's a funny story because I was sat in the library at university and he walked up to me and he said, I can see you are doing something musical. What are you doing? I was like, who are you? Never met this man in my entire life. I was like, okay. So I showed him and he was like, aha, we shall collaborate. And a friendship was born and we did collaborate. So there's been one song that's come out that's a collaboration between me and Ehsan, which is called Restless Dreamer. But we finished another song called, well, it hasn't been named yet, but I'm going to call it right now Inside Out because that's his working title. And that will come out this year, which will be really exciting. And that's kind of, so he is very much a metal rock fanatic. He's very talented in that area, whereas I'm folk, alternative pop, and so it's kind of Inside Out is kind of if you mash those 2 worlds together quite ferociously.
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that coming out. What else is happening? Oh goodness, loads of stuff really. Lots of songs to come because I'm working about 4 months ahead of everything that's coming out. So on Friday the 28th of May, I don't know that will probably be in the past by the time this comes out, but my second single is launching. We will link to that for sure. Fantastic, that would be great. Well, yeah, so that will be out probably. But I'm currently working, I'm just finishing up stuff that's not coming out till the end of July / through August right now. So that's kind of what's coming up in my diary, I guess, right now is content creation for that, which is nice. Well, there's lots of music to look forward to. Yeah, as it seems. A lot. I like that you have a schedule. I like to have a schedule too. Like I'm not always as far ahead, but I like to know for the next 5-6 weeks at least, because I also do try to do a single every month, not more often because otherwise you can't really stay promoting it. Yeah. But yeah, very interesting. Thank you so much for taking the time. This was really insightful. I encourage everyone to check out the links that we'll post underneath this video to discover this music and this artistry.
yeah, thank you for being part of this.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great, and you're a great interviewer. So there you go. I look forward to watching this back. I have this horrible interview habit where I can't actually remember anything I've said after I've done the interview because I won't have prepared, because I think it's nice to go into these things. Like, I will have prepared, obviously, like I've looked at your stuff, but I won't have prepared any answers or anything.
Yeah.
And I like to go into these things blind because I think it makes for a more interesting interview, but equally because I'm just talking as I'm thinking, it'll be interesting for me to watch it back too and find out what kind of things I've actually said.
That's funny, but I think you're right, because otherwise it's just pre-rehearsed answers, and like this is a conversation. It's more fun.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think.